During the summer of 1940, as the war raged in the skies above Western Europe, the RAF tested its pre-war tactics for the first time against the experienced Luftwaffe. Britain hadn't been involved in a large air conflict since 1918, and the RAF's fighter tactics were basically modern variants of those during the First World War. These tactics were known as fighter area attacks. In a fighter area attack, a squadron of 12 fighters was divided into two flights, A Flight and B Flight. Each flight was further divided into two sections of 3 aircraft in a so-called Vic formation. Once the enemy was spotted, the 4 sections would break formation to attack according to 6 different scenarios, depending on the position and size of the enemy force. The tactics worked well in peacetime exercises, but relied on the assumption that they would be used against bomber formations without fighter escort. Given the distance from Germany to Britain, this was a reasonable premise. German tactics had been refined during the Spanish Civil War, and it quickly became apparent that fighter command's standard tactics were useless. In the tight Vic formation, the 2 wingmen were more concerned to maintain the formation as the section leader was searching for enemy aircraft. With flexibility and surprise being key elements in aerial combat, German fighter pilots decimated the ranks of fighter command in the resulting dogfights. When the Battle of Britain began, RAF leadership refused to change the official doctrines and training because there was no time to experiment with something radically different. Pilots were being rushed through training courses, and with ammunition in short supply, even air-to-air firing training was inadequate. However, experienced pilots quickly abandoned close formations and adopted the Finger 4 formation, which was already being used by the Luftwaffe. This tactic involved 4 aircraft flying in a loose formation but operating in pairs, with the leader diving to attack and the wingman staying behind to protect the leader. The Finger 4 tactic also changed the formation of the entire squadron, as it would now be divided into 3 sections of 4 aircraft. When engaged in combat, the plan was to draw enemy fighters away from the bombers using Spitfire squadrons. The slower Hurricanes were then free to attack the bombers. However, this plan didn't always work out that way. Hurricane pilots found themselves fighting against fighter escorts as often as did the Spitfire pilots. Both the Spitfire and the Hurricane had a tighter turn radius than the German Bf-109, an advantage that helped RAF pilots to shake an enemy fighter off their tail. Another tactic that was used for the first time during the last days of the Battle of Britain was the Big Wing formation. The idea of the Big Wing was to get 3 to 5 squadrons to form together before engaging enemy aircraft. It was proposed by Air Vice Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory and acting squadron leader Douglas Bodo. The bulk of the Battle of Britain was fought by 11 Group, commanded by Air Vice Marshal Keith Park. Park favored the use of smaller formations to break enemy bomber formations before they could reach their targets. When his group needed reinforcements, he could call for support from 10 Group, which covered southwest England, and from 12 Group, which covered the Midlands and East Anglia. 12 Group was commanded by Leigh-Mallory. He believed that each group would present itself as a more formidable foe if it attacked the incoming raids in large numbers. His views were not shared by Keith Park because it took a lot of time to get all the squadrons assembled in a Big Wing formation. With his squadrons being at the forefront of the battle, time was a luxury he couldn't afford. Leigh-Mallory's Big Wing was used for the first time on September 7th. As Park predicted, it arrived when the bombers had already hit their targets. The Big Wing claimed only 11 enemy aircraft destroyed for the loss of 1 fighter. On September 15th, the Big Wing was scrambled twice against incoming raids and claimed 52 kills. While not effective as a defensive tactic, the Big Wing was still being used when the Allies went on the offensive. Leigh-Mallory took over command of 11 Group after the Battle of Britain, and his Big Wing formation turned into an offensive tactic for massive fighter sweeps over Western Europe. However, Leigh-Mallory came in for criticism as these raids caused the RAF heavy casualties, with over 500 pilots lost in 1941 alone. Now that the Germans were on the defensive, they possessed many of the advantages which had served the RAF in the summer of 1940.